It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and I was stuck in traffic on I-5 rain, sliding down the windshield like endless gray ribbons. I had just finished another 10-hour shift at St. Mary's, exhausted but comforted by the thought of at least being with family soon. Then my phone lit up. Mom on speaker, Dad's voice cutting through before I could even say hello. "Abby, you're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize to Emily." My chest froze, but the worst part wasn't his words. It was the laughter that followed. Emily's voice, sharp and cruel. "She can eat leftovers in the garage." More laughter, careless, echoing in my ears. In that instant, surrounded by brake lights and strangers, I realized I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the family's punchline erased from the table I had spent years paying to keep together. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to hit subscribe, smash like button, and tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. I froze. I could hear my mother somewhere in the background, but she didn't correct them, didn't stop it. My father stayed silent, as if Emily's cruelty was fine, even funny. My throat went dry. "Mom. Dad. Are you serious right now?" More silence. Then my father again, stern and final. "Think about it. If you want to come, you know what to do." The call clicked off. Just like that. I sat there in my car, the noise of the freeway, a dull roar around me, heart pounding against my ribs. My hands felt slick on the wheel. My chest tight, like the air itself had turned thick. My sister's words echoed in my head. Leftovers in the garage. Repeated, mocking, louder than the traffic outside. I'd been tired a moment before, but now every nerve in me was lit. Anger, confusion, humiliation, all swirling together until I didn't know whether to scream or cry. The rain blurred the view of the taillights ahead, red smears across my windshield, but I barely saw them. Inside, something shifted. Not a snap, not an explosion, but something heavier, like a fault line that had been grinding for years and finally cracked. I thought of all the times I'd kept quiet to keep the peace. The years I had smiled, nodded, swallowed their barbs. The way I'd always been the one to bend, the one to smooth things over. In that single moment on the freeway, I realized that my silence hadn't been strength. It had been permission. Permission for them to dismiss me, to laugh at me, to treat me like I was disposable. I exhaled the sound loud in the empty car. My chest still burned, but underneath the hurt something colder took root. A decision that hadn't quite formed yet, but was solid enough to know things would not continue this way. The traffic lurched forward, and I eased off the brake, my mind still replaying every word. My father's voice, my sister's laugh, the silence that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in that family. And as I drove slowly south through the drizzle, I knew this Thanksgiving would be different. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was done. When I finally pulled into the lot outside my apartment in Tacoma that night, the rain had turned into a fine mist clinging to my jacket as I hurried up the stairs. The place was small, one bedroom, but it was mine, and usually it felt like a safe cocoon after long shifts. That night it felt hollow. I dropped my bag on the couch, kicked off my wet shoes, and pulled out my phone, needing distraction. The family group chat lit up the screen. Thanksgiving 2024. My thumb hovered over it for a second, my stomach tightening before I tapped it open. Names filled the thread. My dad, Richard. Mom, Susan. Emily, of course. Mark, my older brother. Tyler, our cousin. Aunt Donna. Even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. It read like a roll call of who mattered. My name wasn't there. I blinked, scrolled up and down, thinking maybe I'd missed it. But no. The thread listed who was bringing what dish, who was riding with whom. My chest tightened again, sharper than on the freeway. I typed quickly, trying to keep it light. "Hey, I think my name got left off. Is there a mistake?" The typing dots appeared, Mom replied. "Just trying to make sure everyone has space." I frowned at the screen. Space. Their house had always overflowed with people with kids running between legs, folding chairs crammed around the dining room table. There was always room. Dad's reply came next, short and final: limited seating. A moment later, Emily chimed in a turkey emoji, then the words, "Try Christmas if you behave." Tyler followed with a looping gif of someone laughing so hard they fell out of a chair. The phone slipped a little in my damp hands. My throat went dry. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This wasn't about space. This wasn't some oversight. They had deliberately carved me out, left me outside the circle like I was nothing more than an afterthought. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything else. What was left to say? Any defense I made would just be more fuel for their mockery. I locked the phone and set it face down on the table, but the words had already carved themselves into me. I sat on the edge of the couch, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. My mind spun backwards, pulling up 100 little cuts I'd brushed aside. I remembered a summer dinner 2 years ago. I had started talking about a project at St. Mary's, how I'd reorganized part of the billing system and gotten recognition from the department head. Before I'd even finished, my dad had turned to Emily. "Didn't you just get that new client? Tell us about it." The conversation shifted instantly, everyone clapping for her. My story evaporated, my voice swallowed by the room. Or the Thanksgiving 3 years back when I brought 3 full grocery bags filling the kitchen counters with produce and fresh rolls I'd bought with my own money. Emily walked in behind me, holding a single pumpkin pie from the bakery. "Oh, Emily, that looks delicious," Mom gushed, hugging her. My bags were barely glanced at. It had always been like that. My words turned into air, my efforts invisible, while Emily's smallest move was celebrated. And I had smiled through it, told myself it didn't matter that I was doing what family did. But staring at the phone that night, the ache shifted into something colder. A frost spreading in my chest. This wasn't just a mistake, wasn't just bad manners, it was a choice. They had chosen to cut me out to make me the punchline. I stood pacing the small apartment, my socks whispering against the carpet. Rain tapped lightly on the window, the city beyond hazy and gray. I wanted to cry, but the tears stayed stuck. Instead, I felt my jaw lock, my shoulders stiffen. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't dared admit before. All those times I thought I was keeping the peace, all the years of staying quiet. It hadn't earned me love. It had only made me easier to dismiss. The phone buzzed once more on the table. Another message came through. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would say. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to answer. I just stood there in my tiny living room, staring at the rain sliding down the glass, and let the cold settle deeper into me. I opened my laptop not because I had anything urgent to do, but because I couldn't sit in silence with my thoughts any longer. The glow of the screen filled the dark living room, and without meaning to, I clicked through old folders. Budget spreadsheets, scanned receipts, bank statements I had filed away over the years. Each file was a breadcrumb trail back to moments I had tried hard to forget. In 2016, I saw the transfer slip clear as day. $3,200 moved straight out of my savings into my parents' account. Dad had fallen on the ice and torn up his knee. The surgery was covered mostly, but not all of it. I remembered him on the phone, his voice tight with shame. "Insurance won't cover the rest, Abby. We don't know how we'll pay." I hadn't hesitated. I withdrew what I'd been saving for a vacation I never took. "Don't worry about it," I told him. "Just focus on getting better." He'd thanked me once briefly, and then the subject was never raised again. 2 years later, 2018, another memory surfaced. Winter had been brutal that year, temperatures dropping below freezing for weeks. The electric bill doubled, maybe even tripled. I'd stopped by the house one evening and caught Mom sighing over the stack of envelopes. "Maybe we'll just have to turn the heat down," she'd murmured, her hands red from the cold. I didn't say anything then, but later that night I logged into their account and paid the $600. When she noticed the balance zeroed out, she just smiled faintly and said, "You're always so responsible, Abby." Responsible. As if that single word explained away everything. 2020 was the hardest. Dad's heart surgery. The insurance took care of most of it, but $5,000 remained hanging over them like a storm cloud. I remembered standing in my own kitchen staring at my savings account, knowing that paying would drain years of discipline. I hit transfer anyway. When I visited him in recovery, he patted my hand and said, "Good thing you know how to hold on to money, huh?" He said it like a joke, but it lodged inside me heavy and sour. I closed my eyes now sitting on my couch, and the ache of that moment pressed against my ribs. I'd bought him time literally, and all he saw was a daughter who was good with money. 2 years after that, 2022, another holiday season, grocery bags dug into my palms as I carried them up the front steps to their house. Fresh produce, roast wine rolls, the works. I'd spent almost $300 that morning telling myself it was my gift to the family. Emily came in an hour later with a single bakery pie. "Oh, sweetheart, that looks amazing," Mom gushed, kissing her on the cheek. Dad chuckled and told her she really knew how to pick out dessert. My arms ached from hauling bags. My bank account ached from another dent, and no one even noticed. The screen in front of me blurred as my eyes stung. One after another, the years piled up in my mind, not in dates or numbers, but in feelings. The knot in my stomach when I hit confirm payment, the way my heart clenched when praise bypassed me and landed squarely on Emily's shoulders. Dad's words from years ago echoed in my head, low and dismissive. "You're good at holding on to money, Abby, but that's not really success, is it?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I thought silence had been proof of my love. I thought doing all of this quietly meant I was strong. But looking back at the long chain of transactions, I realized silence had only made me easy to use. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. The rain outside had turned into a steady rhythm tapping against the window. I imagined myself again at the grocery store checkout line 2 years ago. The conveyor belt piled high with food, the cashier telling me the total while I swiped my card. Around me, families laughed together, kids tugged on sleeves, people planned their holidays. And there I was alone, paying for everyone else's feast. I pictured myself walking out of that store, the weight of the plastic bags cutting into my fingers, the handles leaving marks on my skin. I'd carried them across the parking lot by myself, balancing them against my legs, shifting their weight as they cut deeper into my palms. I had walked through the front door of the house, sweat on my brow, despite the cold, setting the bags on the counter while everyone else relaxed in the living room. That memory hardened in me, closing like a door. I leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling of my dim apartment. My heart hurt, but beneath the hurt was clarity. For nearly a decade, I had been the invisible scaffolding holding up their lives, and they had laughed at me, dismissed me, erased me. And now, sitting there with the glow of the laptop fading into sleep mode, I knew one thing with certainty: something had to change. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and damp, the kind of November chill that crept through every crack in the window. My apartment in Tacoma felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in on me, while the faint sound of laughter and clinking dishes drifted through from my neighbors. I stood in my tiny kitchen boiling a pack of ramen, the steam fogging up the window above the sink. The smell of salty broth filled the space, but it did nothing to warm me. The television murmured from the living room, a parade on the screen, brass bands and floats rolling down streets I had never walked. None of it felt like mine. Halfway through forcing down noodles that tasted like cardboard, my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, but the name lit up the screen. Mom? The text was short, almost casual. "We saved you a plate. It's on the porch. You can pick it up." I stared at the words, reread them, my chest hollowing out. "No, we miss you. No, come by." Just a plate, like a charity offering. For a long time I sat frozen, the cooling noodles limp in the bowl. Then I grabbed my keys. I didn't even bother with a coat. The drive south to my parents' house in Tacoma felt endless and too short all at once. The highway was slick with rain, the sky hanging low and gray. My hands clenched the steering wheel, jaw tight. I kept telling myself I only wanted to see it with my own eyes to know it was real. When I finally turned onto their street, the sight hit me harder than I was ready for. The house was glowing lights, spilling from the windows. Cars lined the curb, the familiar ones of cousins and aunts and family friends. Even through my closed windows, I could hear laughter. Loud, warm, alive. Then, my eyes caught it. Right there on the front porch, next to the welcome mat, sat a paper plate wrapped in aluminum foil. Damp from the drizzle, the foil sagged slightly. A neighbor's orange cat crouched nearby, tail flicking as it sniffed at the corner. Across the street, Mr. Collins from next door was out watering his winter pansies, raincoat hood pulled tight. He glanced over, saw me idling at the curb. His eyes flicked from my car to the lonely plate on the porch, then back again. His mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite pity, wasn't quite amusement. A small smirk, quick then gone. The humiliation burned up my neck. I gripped the wheel so hard my hands hurt. My own family had reduced me to this. An afterthought left out in the rain, a plate of scraps not even worth bringing inside. And worse, someone else had seen it. I couldn't make myself step out. I couldn't walk up those stairs, lift that pathetic foil-wrapped bundle, while voices and laughter spilled from the warm rooms just feet away. My throat tightened, vision blurring. My chest ached like someone had cut straight through it. For a moment I thought I might scream, or cry, or both. Instead I sat there staring until my own reflection in the window looked like a stranger, and then I heard Emily's voice muffled but clear from inside the house. She was laughing. Thung. The sound carried through the walls, rich and easy. My father's deeper laugh followed. That was enough. I started the engine again, the hum loud in the silence of the car. My eyes flicked once more to the plate, the cat now pawing at the edge of the foil. I pressed the gas and pulled away from the curb. The tears finally came as I turned the corner, hot and unstoppable, sliding down my cheeks. But underneath them, somewhere deeper, a new certainty coiled. This was the last time I would ever beg for space at their table. A few days later, I tried to settle back into the rhythm of work, of commuting from Tacoma up to the billing office at St. Mary's, of grabbing takeout on the way home and collapsing on the couch with a book. But the silence I had chosen didn't last long. My phone began to light up again, not with apologies, not with concern, but with demands. The first call came from Tyler. I almost let it go to voicemail, but my thumb betrayed me. Hey, 'cause his voice boomed, too cheerful, too familiar. Listen, I'm a little short this month. Jen's birthday is coming up and I want to get her something special, you know. Could you spot me, 600? I swear I'll pay you back next month. His laugh followed, light and expectant, as if the money were already his. I kept the phone pressed to my ear, silent, waiting for him to realize how absurd he sounded. He didn't. Family takes care of family, right? He added like it was some magic phrase. I ended the call without answering. Not an hour later, a text from Emily buzzed through. Insurance on my car is late. Can you help me cover it this month? $400. Just until I get paid. She added a sad face emoji, as if that would soften the ask. I stared at the words, remembering her smirk when she told me to behave in the group chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I set the phone face down. That night, as I reheated leftovers alone, the phone rang again. My dad's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice came heavy-low, trying for gentle. Abby, honey, your mom and I need a little help. The car broke down. We need $1,200 for the repair, just to get things moving again. You're always so good with money. Something inside me shifted as I listened. I'd heard these pleas for years, but this time they didn't sound like need. They sounded like orders, like expectation, not request. I hung up with a vague, I'll see what I can do. Then I sat in my silent apartment, the hum of the fridge the only sound my chest tight. I picked up my phone again, this time not to answer but to scroll. I opened my bank app and began moving backward through time transaction by transaction, transfers to my parents' account, checks written to cash that ended up in Tyler's rent, Zelle payments to Emily labeled insurance or just until next paycheck. The screen filled with line after line, black text against white numbers draining from me into them. I scrolled back months, then years. Hundreds of transactions, each one. A tiny cut, a quiet giving away of myself. At first I thought of them as acts of love, but sitting there bathed in the glow of the phone screen, I saw them for what they were. A pattern. A system. A pipeline from my life into theirs. I thought of my savings goals that never materialized. The vacation I never took. The condo I dreamed of buying but couldn't reach for. All because every time they called I had said yes. My throat tightened, eyes burning. I whispered into the quiet, my own voice foreign to my ears. Every call means the same thing. My wallet is still open. I scrolled faster, my finger trembling against the glass. The app lagged, struggling to keep up with the weight of the history. Rent money for Tyler again and again. Prescriptions for Mom. A down payment for a new water heater. Grocery runs where I'd covered the balance. Utilities that somehow ended up on my card. The numbers blurred, but the truth sharpened. This wasn't family, this wasn't care. This was exploitation dressed as love. I dropped the phone onto the couch, the screen going dark. My reflection stared back faintly in the black glass. My face looked older, more tired than I remembered. I pressed my palms against my eyes, forcing back the tears. For years I thought giving was strength. But now, sitting in my tiny living room surrounded by the echoes of their demands, I saw it clearly. It wasn't strength. It was surrender. And I knew I couldn't surrender anymore. I met Clara on a rainy afternoon at a cafe in downtown Seattle. The place was crowded with people escaping the drizzle, their coats draped over chairs, steam rising from paper cups. A soft jazz record played in the background, the clink of dishes layering on top of it. Clara sat near the window. Her short silver hair neatly brushed back, her eyes sharp even behind reading glasses. She smiled when I walked in, motioned for me to sit. I ordered a black coffee, though my stomach was too tight to drink much of it. For a while, I just wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into my skin. When I finally spoke, it came out in bursts. I told her about the call in the car, my dad's voice flat as he banned me from Thanksgiving. I described the plate of food left on the porch, the cat nosing at it while neighbors watched. I told her about the years of payments of bills I had quietly covered, of surgeries and repairs and insurance and groceries that drained thousands out of my life. Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't offer pity or outrage. She just listened, eyes steady, her hand occasionally circling her coffee spoon. When I finished, the silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of voices around the cafe. Then she leaned forward, her voice calm, but edged with steel. Abby, you don't need me to tell you what's happening. They're not just taking your money. They're taking your life. You need to perform a financial exorcism. Cut every tie, every automatic payment, every safety net you've built for them. It won't be easy, but it's the only way you'll get free. The words hung heavy. Financial exorcism. I'd never thought of it that way, but she was right. I swallowed my throat dry. But they're my family. Doesn't that mean I'm supposed to help? Clara's gaze didn't waver. Helping and being exploited are not the same thing. You've carried them for a decade. Has it earned you respect or just more demands? I looked down into the black swirl of my coffee, unable to answer. Clara reached into her bag and slid a business card across the table. Call him. Michael Carter. He's a lawyer I trust. He'll explain your rights better than I can. I tucked the card into my pocket like it burned. The next afternoon, I found myself in Michael's office, a tidy space in a brick building near Pioneer Square. The walls were lined with law books and diplomas hung neatly behind his desk. He was in his early 40s, kind-eyed but direct, his voice practiced from years of explaining complicated things to anxious clients. I told him everything, the years of bills, the recent calls, my father's ultimatum. I waited for judgment, for some shake of the head that said I was heartless for even considering stepping away. Instead, Michael folded his hands and said simply, "In this country, no adult child has a legal obligation to financially support their parents, unless there's a specific court order or signed agreement. You don't owe them. Not a dollar. If you choose to give, that's generosity. But you are under no duty." The room felt like it tilted. I gripped the edge of the chair. "So, I can just stop?" He nodded. "You can stop today if you want. They might be angry, they might try guilt, but the law will not force you to keep paying. Your money is yours." I sat there stunned. For years I had believed it was my role, my duty, even my identity as a daughter. To hear that it wasn't that I had a right to keep what I earned, it cracked something open inside me. On the drive home, the city lights blurred through the rain on my windshield. My heart pounded, not with shame, but with something close to relief. That evening, I met Clara again, this time at a quieter cafe, the kind of place where the barista knew her order. I told her what Michael had said, that I had no legal ties binding me to my family's debts. She nodded as if she had expected nothing less. "Good. Now comes the hard part. You need to see the proof. Not for them, though eventually they'll see it too, but for yourself. You need to know exactly what you've given." I frowned. "I know I've given a lot. Thousands. Tens of thousands, maybe." "Not maybe," Clara said firmly. "You need to know the number. Every cent. Put it together in one place where you can't ignore it. Make a binder. Print it, highlight it, tab it. That binder will be your weapon, your shield. When they come at you, and they will, you'll have the truth in your hands." The idea sent a shiver through me. A binder thick with receipts and statements laid out like a ledger of my entire adulthood. It felt daunting, terrifying, but also strangely empowering. I nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." Clara reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. "Then you're ready. This is where everything changes." I drove home through the dark, the card from Michael still in my pocket. Clara's words echoing in my head. My apartment waited small and quiet, but for the first time it felt less like a cage and more like the starting line of something new. I closed the door behind me, turned on the lamp, and looked around at the stacks of mail, the folders of old bills, the clutter of a life lived carefully but invisibly. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'll start. And I knew I meant it. On Saturday night, I found myself standing in the office supply aisle of a Target in downtown Tacoma, staring at rows of binders. I picked the thickest one I could find, 3 inches wide with a clear plastic cover, the kind meant for school projects or corporate reports. I grabbed packs of plastic sleeves, highlighters, sticky notes, and colored tabs. The cashier looked at me curiously as I loaded them onto the belt, but I couldn't explain. This wasn't a school project. It was a record of my life. Back in my apartment, I cleared the dining table and stacked everything there. The lamp over the table cast a cone of yellow light, and for a moment I stood still, staring at the empty binder, my chest tight. Then I opened my laptop and started printing. Page after page shot out of the printer bank statement, stretching all the way back to 2015. The stack grew high, curling at the edges, smelling faintly of toner. I slipped the first statements into sleeves and labeled tabs. Mortgage, taxes, utilities, groceries, medical, Emily, Tyler. Each name, each category its own indictment. I started with the mortgage. Every time I had made a payment toward my parents' house, every tax bill I had covered was there in black and white. $18,000. I highlighted the total, the neon yellow screaming off the page. My stomach flipped, remembering the way Dad had once joked that I should stop hoarding money and live a little. That hoard had kept the bank from taking his house. Next came the utilities. Power bills, water, gas. Hundreds of small charges that had added up over 9 years to $15,000. I remembered Mom sighing in the winter cold, whispering about cutting back on heat. I had thought I was protecting her. Now I saw how invisible those sacrifices had been. Groceries and medical went into the next sections. $12,000 in receipts, co-pays, prescriptions, groceries bought on my lunch breaks. I thought of the way Emily would waltz in with a pie and be lavished with praise while my bags of fresh produce barely earned a glance. My throat tightened, but my highlighter kept moving, marking each total like a wound. Then Emily's section, $7,500 in car payments, insurance, and bailouts. I flipped through line after line, each one a reminder of her breezy texts. Can you cover me just this once? Always just this once? Never repaid. Tyler's section was worse. $12,000 for rent, beer, concerts, emergencies. The Venmo history was a ledger of entitlement. I slid the pages into sleeves, my hands shaking, each one louder than his voice laughing about me eating in the garage. When I finally closed the binder, my table looked like a war room. Sticky notes flagged the pages, yellow highlights bled across the numbers. The binder was heavy in my hands, almost too heavy. I sat down, laid it in my lap, and opened it again. $65,430. That was the sum of my silence. I stared at the number until my eyes blurred. Each page was a cut, but together it was a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. I pressed my palms flat against the cover and exhaled. This isn't imagined, I whispered. This is proof. This is the truth. A knock at the door startled me. I jumped, wiped at my eyes, and opened it. Clara stood there, shaking her umbrella free of rain. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the stacks of paper. "You've been busy," she said. I nodded, throat too tight to answer. She walked to the table, pulled the binder toward her, and flipped through slowly. Page after page, her eyes scanning the totals. She didn't look shocked. She looked like someone confirming what she had already known. When she reached the last tab, she closed the binder gently and rested her hand on top. Then she looked at me. "This," she said, "is your armor. And it's also their indictment." I swallowed hard, the words sinking deep. Armor and indictment. Clara slid the binder back toward me. "When they try to deny, when they call you selfish, you open this. They can't argue with what's in here. Numbers don't lie." I knotted my fingers, tightening on the cover. The rain beat harder against the windows, the room warm with the scent of paper and ink. Clara poured herself a glass of water from my sink, then turned back to me. "The next step will be the hardest. You'll have to cut them off. Not quietly, not halfway. Completely." I touched the spine of the binder, feeling its weight. "I think I can." "You can," Clara said firmly. "And when you do, you'll feel it. The relief, the power." I sat back, the binder still in my lap. My chest was heavy, but beneath it a strange strength hummed. I had always thought of myself as the quiet one, the sensible one, the daughter who didn't make waves. But now I had a record, a weapon, a truth they couldn't laugh away. Clara gathered her coat, ready to leave. At the door, she paused. "Remember, Abby, this isn't revenge. This is survival. And survival is nothing to be ashamed of." When the door clicked shut behind her, I sank into my chair again, the binder open in front of me. The pages glowed under the lamplight, every number a reminder, every highlight a scar. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was preparing for battle. The morning of December 1st broke cold and gray, the kind of Seattle chill that seeps straight through your coat. I called in a personal day at St. Mary's and sat at my small kitchen table with a mug of coffee, staring at the binder in front of me. I whispered to myself D-Day because that's what it felt like. A day of dismantling, of cutting the cords I had let strangle me for 10 years. I started with the mortgage company. My heart thudded as I dialed, fingers damp against the phone. When a representative picked up, cheerful and polite, I gave her my father's account number and my own information. I need to cancel my autopay authorization, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She asked why. I swallowed and answered, because I will no longer be making these payments. Please send all future bills directly to Richard Moore, the homeowner. There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then she said it was done. An email confirmation would arrive shortly. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the quiet phone in my hand. Just like that one thread was cut. Next was the phone plan. I drove to the Verizon store near downtown Tacoma, the clouds heavy overhead. Inside the store was bright and sterile, a few people milling around with new phones. A young man in a red shirt asked if he could help me. I handed him my account details, explaining I wanted to move my line to a new individual account and transfer the rest to my mother. He tapped on his tablet, nodding. So you'll be releasing the other 4 lines and your mother will become the new account owner. She'll be responsible for the bill moving forward. That's right, I said, forcing my voice calm. He slid a digital form toward me. My hand shook slightly as I signed. When it was done, he handed me a small white envelope with a new SIM card. You're all set, he said cheerfully. Not knowing his words carried more weight than he could imagine, I walked out into the parking lot, clutching that envelope. For the first time in 6 years, the phone in my pocket was truly mine. Back home, I opened my laptop and logged into Amazon. My account blinked with a familiar list of recent purchases. My father's favorite dark roast coffee, my mother's vitamins, Tyler's ridiculous protein powder, all shipped to their address, all charged to me. My jaw tightened as I clicked delete payment method. The screen flashed payment required. For the first time in a decade, it wouldn't be mine. Netflix was next. Hulu, Max. One by one, I removed my card from each account. The pharmacy app still had my card saved for automatic refills. Delete. Even the grocery delivery account where I had ordered food more times than I could count wiped clean. Every click made my heart race. My hands trembled, but each deletion left me lighter. I sat straighter in my chair. Muinamqua, every account, every comfort stood on my shoulders. I whispered in my own tongue, then in English in a voice stronger, and today I disappear from all of it. By noon it was done. My inbox filled with confirmation emails, autopay canceled cards, removed accounts, updated. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the silence in my apartment ringing in my ears. I picked up the small envelope from Verizon, opened it carefully, and slid the new SIM card into my phone. The screen flickered, reset, and came back to life. My new number, my own account, free of anyone else. I stared at it, the weight of the tiny chip more symbolic than anything I had ever bought. My lips curved into the smallest smile. For the first time, I murmured, "This phone actually belongs to me." And with that, I set it down on the table beside the binder, the 2 symbols of my new beginning lying side by side. 3 days after I cut the cords, the storm began. The first buzz came mid-morning while I was at my desk at St. Mary's. I glanced down. A text from Emily: Netflix isn't working. Fix it. No hello, no please, just a demand. I set the phone face down, finished typing a report, and let it vibrate against the desk until it stopped. That afternoon, another message lit up the screen. Mom, I just got an email from Verizon. It says I'm the new account holder and the bill is $220. Abby, what's going on? I read it twice, the words sharp but tinged with confusion. I didn't respond. By evening, the calls started. Dad's number flashed again and again. I let them roll to voicemail until my inbox was full of his voice, rough with frustration. One stood out. Your mother's prescription was declined at the pharmacy. What did you do? You need to fix this right now. I listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, Tyler's text exploded onto my phone. My phone's about to get cut off. Are you out of your damn mind? I stared at his words, the fury behind them, and felt nothing but a cool stillness. One by one, they poured in. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes, buzzing, chiming, lighting up my small apartment. The old me would have scrambled, apologized, pulled out my wallet, tried to smooth things over. Now I sat on the couch with my coffee, watching the messages roll by like weather reports. Every ping that once made my stomach twist now felt like another chain falling away. I scrolled through the unread messages lines of text barking commands. Pay this, fix that, call me. None of them asked how I was. None of them offered anything but expectation. My chest rose and fell slowly, almost calm. I whispered to myself so softly it barely left my lips. Silence isn't weakness this time. It's my weapon. I locked the phone and set it down, pushing it away like something toxic. For the first time in years, I didn't feel panic in ignoring them. I felt power. Hours later, another message arrived, this one from Dad. Short, cold, final. You betrayed the family. I picked up the phone, stared at the words glowing in the dim light of my apartment. My reflection shone faintly on the glass. My lips curled into the smallest, sharpest smile. No, I murmured into the silence. You betrayed me. The phone stayed dark in my hand, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. A week later, Mom called. Her voice was thin, brittle, almost unrecognizable. Abby, please, just come over. We need to talk. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I drove down to Tacoma. The binder rode in the passenger seat, its weight both terrifying and comforting. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my chest was tight, my hands damp on the wheel. The house looked the same as always, warm lights glowing in the windows, but I didn't feel welcome. Not anymore. Inside, the air was heavy. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. They were all waiting Dad at the head of the table, Mom wringing her hands beside him. Emily perched on a chair with her arms folded. Tyler leaning back like he owned the place. The kitchen, where I had once peeled potatoes, where laughter used to spill across Thanksgiving mornings, now felt like a courtroom. I walked in without a word, set the binder down on the table, and let the sound of it hitting wood echo. My father frowned. What is this? This, I said evenly, sliding into a chair, is the conversation you wanted. I flipped to the first section. Mortgage. Yellow highlights glared off the pages. 3 years ago, when you thought the bank would come after the house for unpaid property tax. That was me. $18,000 in total over the years to keep this roof over your heads. Dad's face drained of color. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no words came. I turned to the next section. Utilities. $15,000. Gas, electric, water. Every time the lights stayed on, every time the heat worked in December, it was because I paid. Mom let out a quiet sob, her hand fluttering to her mouth. Next tab, groceries and medical. $12,000. Co-pays for prescriptions, hospital bills, bags of food that filled this very kitchen. Emily shifted uncomfortably, cheeks blotched red. You always make yourself the victim, she muttered. I didn't look at her. I flipped to the thickest section, Tyler. I pushed the papers across the table toward him. $12,000. Rent, beer money, concert tickets, and just last week you asked me for $600 more, for a gift for your girlfriend. After laughing about me eating in the garage, Tyler's smirk faltered. I was gonna pay you back, he said quickly, his laugh shaky. I met his eyes, cold and steady. You never have. Not once. The silence pressed down on us, broken only by Mom's muffled crying. I gathered the pages back into the binder, closed it, and placed my hands flat on the cover. Then I looked straight at my father. Dad, you banned me from sitting at this table for Thanksgiving. But I'm the reason this house is still standing. I'm the reason this family has had food heat medicine. And not once did any of you acknowledge it. The words came out low, steady, but they landed heavy. My own voice sounded strange in my ears, stronger than I remembered it being. For the first time, no one had a rebuttal, no excuses, no laughter. The kitchen fell into a silence so thick it rang in my ears. And in that silence, I knew they were finally seeing me. Not as their safety net, not as the wallet they could always reach for, but as a person a daughter, a woman who had finally drawn the line. When I walked out of that kitchen, leaving the binder behind on the table, I didn't look back. The silence that followed me out the door was thicker than anything I'd ever felt in that house. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their weight anymore. Weeks passed. At first, there was nothing but quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then the cracks began to show. A thick envelope came in the mail one morning, forwarded to me by mistake. It was from the bank addressed to my father. The words printed in bold across the top read, "Notice of delinquency. Past due mortgage payments. Warning of potential foreclosure if not resolved." I imagined my father at the kitchen table staring at those same words, no quiet transfer from me to cover the gap this time. I could almost see the hollow look in his eyes, the one he used to carry before I rescued him. Only now there was no rescue coming. A few days later, I overheard Emily's voice through a voicemail she hadn't meant to leave. She must have butt-dialed me while crying to Mom. She'd tried to get financing for a new car, and the loan officer had denied her on the spot. Her credit was in ruins. I knew why. She had piggybacked off my history for years, and without my name to shield her, everything collapsed. I listened for a moment. Her sobs muffled, then deleted the message without calling back. Then came Tyler. His text landed hard on my screen late at night. "You're a monster. Do you know that I just got kicked out of my apartment? Couldn't make rent. This is on you." A minute later, another. "You've ruined us. I hope you're happy." I read them once, then hit delete. The calls from Mom were the hardest to ignore. She left long voicemails. Her voice cracked and shaky. "Abby, your father hasn't slept in days. He's having chest pains. He's not eating. How could you do this to us, after everything we've done for you?" Her crying filled the recording, jagged and desperate. For a moment, guilt tried to crawl back into me. The old reflex to fix, to soothe, pressed at my chest. But then I recognized the pattern, the same manipulation, just dressed in panic. Every word was meant to reel me back into the role I had finally stepped out of. I sat on my couch, listening until the voicemail clicked off. Then I deleted it. My hands didn't shake this time. "They call it betrayal," I whispered to myself, my own voice steady. "But all I've done is force them to live like adults." Another week passed. My phone rang again, an unfamiliar number lighting the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Abby," my father's voice low and tired. For a long moment, he didn't say anything more. I could hear him breathing heavy, strained. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry." The words came haltingly, like they'd been pried out of him. "I made you into a wallet, a bank account. I stopped seeing you as my daughter, and now I don't have a daughter anymore." The silence stretched. I pressed the phone tight to my ear, my throat thick. When I spoke, my voice was quiet, but sure. "You still have a daughter. But now you have to live as a man who takes responsibility, not one who waits for me to carry him." He didn't answer, just a long, shaky exhale. Then the line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, the weight of his words hanging in the air. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, the hum of the heater filling the silence. For the first time, their voices didn't dictate my next move. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. January came cold and bright, and with it a new chapter I had never dared imagine for myself. I stood in the lobby of a modest brick building in downtown Seattle, pen in hand, signing the final papers. The real estate agent slid the keys toward me with a smile, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. This time, the name on the deed wasn't Richard Moore. It wasn't shared or borrowed. It was mine. When I stepped into the apartment, sunlight spilled through wide windows, flooding the small living room with golden light. The hardwood floors gleamed faintly, and the faint scent of fresh paint still hung in the air. It wasn't large, just one bedroom, but every inch belonged to me. I set down the folder of paperwork on the counter and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. I stuck a small note to the refrigerator door, 4 words in bold black marker: "No is a complete sentence." I read it twice, tracing each letter with my eyes until the meaning carved itself into me. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a vow. Later that week, Clara came by. She swept into the apartment with her usual brisk energy, shaking off the cold from outside, and immediately grinned when she saw the sunlight bouncing across the walls. "It suits you," she said, wrapping me in a hug. I showed her around proud in a way I hadn't felt in years. The new couch that I'd chosen myself, the quiet little office corner by the window, the sticky note on the fridge. Clara raised her eyebrows when she saw it. "Good. That's the kind of mantra you need to live by." I opened my laptop and showed her the folder I had started. Instead of receipts and bills and Venmo histories, it was titled simply Plans. Inside were spreadsheets for my retirement savings, a travel fund I'd just opened, and a list of small investments I wanted to make this year. For the first time, every dollar was pointed toward my future instead of theirs. Clara clicked her tongue approvingly. "That's the difference between surviving and living, Abby. You're living now." When she left, I lingered by the window, staring down at the streets of Seattle below. People hurried along with umbrellas bundled against the wind cars, honking faintly in the distance. The city moved on, indifferent, alive, and I was finally part of it on my own terms. For so long, I had felt tethered, like my life wasn't truly mine, that I existed only in the shadows of their needs. Standing there, key in hand, sunlight across my shoulders, I felt it. The startling weight of freedom. 10 years I had been reduced to nothing but a wallet. Now I was myself again. I pressed my palm flat against the cool glass of the window, feeling the vibration of the city beneath it. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peace. I turned back to my apartment, my home, and whispered aloud the words tasting clean and sharp. "This is mine." And now I want to ask you, have you ever been turned into the wallet of your own family, taken for granted until you broke? Share your story with me. And remember, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the strongest power you have.